Hey. Thank you. All right. Thanks for being here. Have lunch. Do your thing. Some really smart people have been studying you, and you as in people your age, and I want to give you some of the things that they've said. And the idea is cleansing the temple. Spoiler alert, you're the temple. I'm the temple. And you might notice that those temples need to be cleansed every once in a while. And that's one of the things I want to discuss with you. How do we navigate these things in our pockets? And this is the researcher who gets a lot of attention. Her name is Jean Twenge. Again, went off to study you, how you're doing psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. I think she has kind of a tin ear to that. And what she says is the adolescent depression rates, look at the numbers here, 2004 to 2016. This whole talk isn't going to be charts, but the charts help. Up, way up. And religion, way down. Percentage identifying as very or moderately religious. Confusingly, to me at least, maybe you can explain it to me, she ends the book by saying, hey, depression's up, but leaving behind traditional structures such as religion, Jen, the word she had for you at that time, have a solid basis for success. And I was like, wait, hold on now. If you said depression is way up and religion is way down, right? Maybe kind of we put those two together. Like maybe they're connected. Maybe if you don't have a structure of meaning in your life, that's one of the reasons it's going up. But anyway, I was hoping she would pursue that further. I haven't been able to talk to her about it, but she did write a new book, so I got my hands on it. Have you seen this book? Brand new, about you. It's not good. Not good at all. As I was leaving today, my wife said, I got bad news for you. Two things. You want the real bad news or the bad news? Let's start with the bad news. The mice are back. Real bad news, the dryer broke, okay? So it wasn't a great day in the Milliner household. And I got bad news for you as well, based on what she has presented to us. Now, the book goes through Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, Boomers, and Generation Z. Do you fit that? Born 1995 to 2012? Okay, that's you. Not me, it's you. So she's like, what do we learn about you? Updated data for 2023. The iGen book was like 2017. What does she tell us? Whoa! Percent of U.S. 8th, 10th, and 12th graders who feel left out or lonely. It's not getting better, she tells us. Percent of U.S. 12th graders not satisfied with themselves and not satisfied with their lives as a whole. This is pre-COVID that these numbers were in. Through the roof. Let's keep going. Percent of U.S. adults not satisfied with life by age group. So 26 to 49, I'm doing okay. But you, 18 to 25, what's going on, she tells us. So her job is, I've got the data. How do I make sense of it? A few more. Percent of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders experiencing symptoms of depression. No one knows what to do with this material. Percent of U.S. teens with clinical level depression. Look at those numbers, 2017 to 2021. What is going on? Now, when I first heard these data, I'm a little suspicious. They're just charts, that people throw together with selective sampling. She's like, no, they can't be explained by, well, you're just young. It's difficult to be young because the data sets survey people of the same age in different years. So that means that there's a control group. There's something especially difficult about your generation that doesn't just show up in other generations when they're young. So she's like, that skepticism does not hold to this data. And it can't be explained by self-reporting. Well, it's just that, this young generation, they're okay with saying they're not okay. And that's why they learn how to respond to data in this way, and they're open about their feelings. She's like, that doesn't work because behavior comes with it. If it was just you're stable and you know how to say, I'm not doing well, and that shows up in the data, it wouldn't manifest in percentage of emergency department admissions for self-harm. It wouldn't manifest, sadly, and if this hits you hard, I am so sorry. I've got good news as well, but it wouldn't manifest in the suicide rate of U.S. teens and young adults. Perhaps even more shocking, 10 to 14-year-olds tripled in suicide rates. So nobody knows what to do with this. She just adds more and more data. The suicide rate, higher and higher. The girls are ahead of the boys. And again, now it's all stats. So you and I just might kind of turn off our sensors. Okay, just hit me with a lot of numbers. She's like, let me help you allow this to settle in. Imagine if I told you, did you hear the news? 9 planes full of 10 to 24-year-olds just crashed. Everyone died on board. If I told you that news right now, the entire country would shut down. There would be national mourning. There would be no flights for the next week, maybe more. And she said that is the equivalent of this statistic. This is how many people are dying above and beyond what happened before if the suicide rates had stayed the same. That's how bad it is. Now, let me ask you a question. I wish she brought up religion because I think it's an answer. But the question I want to ask you is the question that she asked. What is causing it? This is catastrophic, large, consistent, and pervasive. People's actions speak loudly. More are harming themselves. More, your peers, are dying by their own hands. What is the culprit? Who is responsible? Take a wild guess. Yeah. Digital media, more broadly, and smartphones. She claimed that in an Atlantic article, have smartphones destroyed a generation in 2017, and she has tripled down on that conclusion. She's tripled down on that conclusion. She's like, there is no other indicator as to what would cause this other than what these do to our minds. Now, it's complicated. It's not like all screen activity is the same. She parses the data, but she nevertheless says this is to blame. So, check it out. Internet use goes up, and that follows with social media and smartphone ownership goes up, and that follows perfectly with the data that she charted for us. And if there's any sort of good news, maybe, and it's actually horrible news, but I can kind of make it, sweeten the deal a little bit, that Americans are not alone. She says this is international. So don't think it's, a bunch of American teenagers, they're the ones that are suffering. No, everybody, Latin America, Europe, Asia, because everyone's got these things in their hands. So that's the issue. And as you know, hold on. Let me fix it. There we go. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. We got the X. I've updated. Okay. People are getting very wealthy from harvesting your and my anxieties. And this has happened. I like this photograph because in 2005, that is a picture of a papal visit in Rome. And this is 2013. Okay. Update your data. Where are we now? I'm going to zoom in. This is a church in Barcelona with a cell phone ad. I mean, it's an absolute... This is a student took this, and you're not going to believe this, Dr. Milliner. He showed it to me. This is summer 2022 in Barcelona. Complete capitulation. So, how can the church help if we're doing this? Amazing. What do we do? That's the question I've got. We're going to go for about a half hour, and the best thing is I want to hear some Q&A from you. I just stepped into your classroom, and I can't wait for the Q&A because this is going to be fun. So I'm just going to tell you, here's my shot at what we should do. First of all, Dr. Twain should pay attention to faith. I wish she would do that more because sometimes she's like, the African American rates are a little better because of the strength of the black church. I'm like, pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. Thank goodness. So what do? The way art history, which is my profession, I teach the history of art. Michelangelo, Leonardo, all that. The way it used to be taught didn't have to take account of this. And I want to totally overhaul the discipline because of this stuff. So the way it used to be taught, to give you a little refresher course, is, the Catholic and the Orthodox Christians, Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, they use icons In worship, they pray through the icon to Christ. The Reformed, the Protestant tradition, well, they break images. And then finally, the Lutherans, this is the way it was taught, they use images to teach. So that's the way it was often taught, and I think it's completely wrong because all of these traditions do all of these things. Catholics rip down images when they have to, and they did it in the midst of the Reformation. The Reformed, you watch The Chosen, right? Do you refuse to watch it because you don't want to see a depiction of Christ? Most people say, well, this actually might minister to me. I don't confuse the actor with Jesus, I hope, but it might help me. And so I think I'm not going to give you the data, but I'm just going to say, I think this is wrong. And what I'm going to say is you need each of these strategies that art history has provided you to help deal with these. I'll say it again. That's my thesis. You need each of these strategies that the Holy Spirit has gifted the historic church with to deal with a menacing image problem that no generation in the history of Christianity has faced. I want to be careful with what I say. I don't want to exaggerate just to get your attention. But I think that lines up. No generation of Christians have had to deal with these. And so you need everything you can get in the history of art. And I'm going to make it convenient for you. I found an image that has all three. It's an image that you can see in the original in Athens at the Byzantine and Christian Museum in Athens. And I looked at it and I said, well, there it is. These wonderful didactic, that just means to teach, right? Didactic images that point to Jesus. And then the devotional image, what is going on here? Any wild guesses as to what this image is an evocation of? What moment in Jesus' life? Refugee Jesus on the road to Egypt. There are a lot of Palestinians who wish they could get to Egypt, but they can't get through because the border's closed. If you care about them so much, open it. Sorry. There are bait. That's the answer. So he was on that road. And then finally, they get to Egypt. And what happens when Jesus gets to Egypt? What do you see there? You see the little people jumping. No, those are idols falling. When the true Jesus comes to town, the true God, the idols cannot bear it. And that is what this image is, the flight into Egypt, and it has all three. Do you need to destroy images? I think you do. Sometimes, not always. Do you need to have a devotional relationship? Use images. Have a devotional relationship with Jesus. But if images can help, you might need them. 10 years ago, maybe not. You got these. You need an antidote. And then finally, the didactic. That's the most important of all. Let's start with the didactic. We'll go quickly. You might need the gospel preached to you. You might say, I know the gospel. I don't. Parts of me don't know it. There's little parts of me hiding out against Jesus, hoping he won't find me in my heart. He's not going to get us here. And then he descends into hell, descends into my heart, and preaches the gospel to me. And the way that the Lutherans preached the gospel was this way. You've got a life that everything we saw in those charts is summarized right here. You have someone who's going to hell, figurative, perhaps literally too, but figuratively, they are burning in their psyches because of the damage that the law, and let me do a little switch up here, there's the preaching of the law, there is death and the devil chasing this hopeless person into the fire, and there's my update, right? You're not thin enough. That's a law. You're not smart enough. That's a law. Hurts you, hovers over you. You can't shake it. You get more accolades, you lose more weight, and it's still there, isn't it? Don't you? Some of you, I know, I say it with heaviness because I know it's for all of us. It's not good news. It is the definition of anti-gospel, not good news. More. You know, perhaps, if Twenge is right, what this is like. It is the condition of a soul that might believe in God, but he can't help you. He's up there doing his thing, and you are under the curse. This is the picture that the Bible presents us. I'm not saying this is untrue. According to Martin Luther, this is done by his best friend, Lucas Cranach the Elder. He said, let me paint the gospel for you, Martin. And you might think, there's no gospel here, Dr. Milliner. It's just a dry tree. And you'd be right, because the gospel hasn't come yet. The law sets you up for the gospel. When someone takes their hand, points away from themselves to Jesus, and right down here you have in German simple verses from the New Testament to drive the point home. And when that message clicks that guess what? He's enough, you may not be. He's done it all, you may not have. He's risen from the dead, you're going to die, but He's going to take you with Him. When that happens, a super soaker jet stream of blood projected by the Holy Spirit, you can see it, splashes out of Jesus' side all over your face. One day I'm going to have the courage to bring an actual super soaker in and do that when I preach. But I figured I'm just getting to know you. So probably not good yet. But it applies to you. You might think that some algorithm determines your self-worth or your parents or your friends. Jesus says that's the danger of idolatry. They don't get to define you. I do. And I died for you, and you're infinitely worthy of that death. That's what you're worth. And that splatters out, and it changes people's lives. It changed my life. This gospel. I hope it's changed yours too. I hope it changes you right now, because again, I need to hear it over and over again. It's not about my performance. It's about His. What happens to sin, death, and the devil, thanks to the resurrection, the actual physical, literal resurrection? Down here, you have your enemies, death and the devil, who are defeated by this innocent little lamb who's, I've conquered them. Nothing will trouble you anymore. That is, look at the tree is coming to life on this side. That's the gospel. That's the gospel of grace. This is the system of indulgences in the Reformation. What broke through it? What cut through it? The message of grace. You don't have to pay for forgiveness. It's all been purchased for you. Let's update it with our social media, with the clout score. Did you know you can have a clout score? How well you're doing in social circumstances, like my score went up, I did well, my score went down. All of that, what cuts through it all? Grace. Same thing. We need a reformation that goes back to this. So there's our first, the didactic. Let images preach the gospel to you like never before. What's the second? Let's go to destruction, the fun one. Okay, so let's zoom in here a little bit. You see those people. There's Jesus. He's like, uh-oh. No, I flipped that. These people are like, uh-oh, here comes Jesus, right? My Silicon Valley regime won't last if He's in town. And what the early Christians did is they would carve crosses onto images of Caesar. Politics is not ultimate for me, thank you. I will not worship the political leader. I love that. I believe that's my politics. I love it, right? I'm still going to vote, but at the end of the day, I know who's really in charge, and it's definitely not her. And who's she? She's the new goddess. Oh, she's been around for a while, but those of you studying the Odyssey, you know about her. What's her name? Aphrodite. Aphrodite, as they say in Greece. Aphrodite, right? And people worship her. Enslaved to their sexual desires. And what did the early Christians do? They didn't have the sanitized view that we have of Aphrodite today. Oh, wasn't she great if we could just bring her back from the dead? Because they knew that there were some men who would go to the Aphrodite temple in Cyprus, toss a coin on the woman of his choice, or boy, and say, yeah, you're mine. Because I'm pious to Aphrodite. I'll meet you in the back. Seriously. Seriously. They were temple prostitutes to Aphrodite. And if we think the sex trade is over, we would be deluding ourselves. There are people who are still being fed to that goddess. And she is not to be the queen of our lives. And so they carved a cross into the face of this deity. Did they love beauty? Yes, they did. You know, a student of mine really got this. She replicated this image of Aphrodite. And she carved a cross into her forehead to remind her of her baptism. Is it because she hated herself? No. It was because she knew that her false self had been crucified with Christ. Her false self had been immersed in the waters of baptism, and she had risen with Christ. I had never seen a student so confident, and it's because she didn't have to commit suicide, Because she committed egocide. It is no longer ego, I who live, says Paul, but Christ who lives in me. Baptism is the answer to that greatest of temptations to harm yourself. Jesus did that for you. You never need to do it to yourself. So what do we do? This destructive understanding, I think that's where this belongs. Let's rip that puppy down. Right? I used to be embarrassed to be a Protestant because we tore down images all throughout Europe. These are all the sites of iconoclasm in Europe. Those Reformed Christians, they tore images down. Can you believe they didn't love art? Well, guess what? I'm not so embarrassed anymore because of this. Right? It's kind of cool again to tear down images. And maybe some need to be torn down. And so as a Christian, I say, we invented that, right? Well, the Jews invented it. We borrowed it from them. Okay? So it's like, hey, some images must go down. Here are some people celebrating a Confederate monument coming down, and there is an image on Amiens Cathedral of those idols falling when the true Jesus comes to town. Because Christianity overcomes racism. All the ethnos together. Read my colleague, Professor Esau McCauley's work. New York Times columnist does an amazing job of preaching the gospel. The gospel that starts with Jesus and may have this as a result. It doesn't start with this, because if this is all you have, you've got nothing. But if you've got Jesus, this could be a consequence. Here's what I mean by cleansing the temple. This is El Greco's image of Jesus coming into your and my digital media-infused souls, and with love in his eyes, taking it down, right? So what do we do with destructive? Do you delete the app? That's one option. I'm not a pacifist, but I'm glad to have pacifists in my life. I want Mennonites asking me hard questions. And in the same way, I haven't gotten rid of my phone, as you've noticed, but I want people who've gone totally cold, sober digital media in my life. And it's kind of annoying because you have to tell them this is what's going on in the text chain, right? And yeah, this is what happened on social media. I have to explain it to you. But I want those people around. That's one strategy to delete the app. But another might be, phone versus phone. And you've probably already figured this out, right? There's some pretty cool apps out there that can help you use these things to put you in touch with God. Thank God for that strategy too. These are a couple, across the traditional spectrum of Christianity. Sometimes when someone's looking on their phone, they're actually praying. It's quite possible. We had just witnessed a debate about when do you pray? How do you pray? It could be through this, but the best apps turn you from the phone into the presence of the Lord. And then you don't need the phone anymore. I've actually found that all these apps, at the end of the day, they're kind of dissatisfying, even if they're beautifully done. Because it's just supposed to be me alone with the Lord in the desert. And then finally, devotional. That last one. Here is an image of, during Lent at Wheaton, we have morning and evening prayer around an icon, a simple wooden icon of Jesus. The icon that is at the foot of Mount Sinai. How arrogant. Don't they know that's where God said, don't make any graven images? But the early Christians said, this is no graven image. It's him having imaged himself, and these icons humbly point to the reality of the incarnate Lord. And miraculously enough, and I use that word intentionally, I've never been alone when I've prayed here. I've been doing it for about a decade, 8:30 and 4:30, totally optional. And chapel is required at Wheaton, but this is above and beyond that. And I have never been alone. And sometimes I've wanted to be. I'm like, I'm really tired. No, but there's always a student there. I can't explain it. And once I was so tired, I'm like, I'm not going to do these silly Lenten services. I'm just so exhausted. I do enough. And that day, I got a international letter in the mail from Munich, Germany. And I opened it up, Ash Wednesday, opened it up and it said, Dear Dr. Milliner, thank you for how formative those Lenten prayer services were for me. As you resume them again, I'd like to thank you for your service. And I was like, oh, okay, Lord. Immediately sent out the email and we resumed them. And icons help. Icons help. I look around the books in your classrooms here and I see Augustine's Confessions and I see classics. Well, so what icon should I pick? Pick a classic. It's that simple. These are my monk buddies. in Wisconsin, Skeet.com, St. Paul's Monastery, they just make these cheap, I just visited them last weekend. I said, I want to see your shop because you make these cheap icons that I can afford. And there's where they set all the colors right. And I said, why do you do this? Because we want these wonderful Orthodox icons to be in the hands of as many Christians as possible. And then they tried to convert me to Eastern Orthodoxy, which I expected. I didn't yield, but I was like, I'm thanking you for your work. We need you like never before. There's their storage with all these beautiful icons. And you can pick one of an icon that testifies to a Christian that has inspired you in the past. Men, women, who has inspired you? Or maybe a simple image of Jesus. My house is filled with them. And it shapes our children. And besides just simple icons of Jesus, as we round up what I'm going to say, do you know that you have an internal Netflix? That as great as The Chosen is, that's a lot of power to give to a producer, even if it's crowdfunded. Do you know that you can actually close your eyes and experience time with Jesus? And I don't know quite what it's going to look like, but I can assure you it will look the way it needs to look for you. Because just like Jesus knew what to cook Peter for breakfast when he was reconciling with Peter right after Peter betrayed him, cooked him a good breakfast in his resurrected body on the beach, probably just the way Peter liked the fish. Jesus knows what you need, and there is a kind of prayer where you can close your eyes, pray for the guidance of the Holy Spirit, pray for protection from the enemy of our souls, close your eyes and be with the Lord and see how He appears to you. It is a technique of prayer that many Protestants today are picking up. Not invented by this Spanish reformer, Ignatius of Loyola, but popularized by him. And when you look at art history, you see it over and over again. What is this 15th century Dutchman doing at the Annunciation? Do you think he was there? So this is a contemporary Dutchman hanging out in the 15th century at the moment where Jesus, there he is with his cross, flying in, and there's the Virgin Mary. Why is he there? Are they confused? Do they think this guy and this woman, husband and wife, lived in ancient Nazareth? No. They're saying he is imagining himself as if he was there. And you can imagine yourself in the New Testament as well. And you can fight back against these with deeply imaginative prayer times that do that. Far better than our attempts that are, of course, going to be monetized that we can strap around our heads. You can do that with your eyes closed. If you want to learn, there are some Jesuits who put an app together called Pray As You Go. Has anyone heard of this before? It's really wonderful. And you can do a 15-minute, someone guiding you through it. And this is, no church has had to face this before in Christian history, but no Christians in history have had this kind of resource either. Very powerful. I'm going to end with a provocation. This is the Holy Sepulchre with the fire, the holy fire that miraculously, according to the Orthodox, is ignited every Easter. No one can explain it. Very smart people that I know have total belief in this miracle. They say, no one can explain it. All these historical sources testify to it, and it still happens today. So, that's the photograph. So here's what I did for this. Is I said, I want to update my dad. I said, I'm going to talk to Pacifica. I'm going to go watch the 2023 video on YouTube of the Holy Fire ceremony. Who's winning? You got to Jerusalem on Easter, and you did this the whole time. Oh. Now, I need to soften up. Maybe I'm putting grandma who couldn't get there in touch with the holy fire. Okay, good. I get it, right? It can be done in love. You're not hearing an argument against all usage of phone. But I'm saying the stakes are high. The battle is on. Who's going to win, the holy fire or these commodified fake fires that we carry around with us? Folks, I'm afraid that it's only going to get worse. We got more and more stuff to deal with, and we need more and more resources to make it through. And one thing I will say, good news is, when you go to this place, oh, look at that. The first Apple product you can look through and not at, right? It's coming fast. It's coming fast. When you go to the Holy Sepulchre, to see the place where Jesus rose from the dead, you look inside this building. I will tell you some good news. In the 2016 renovation, they removed the marble slab. They, for the first time in centuries, looked at the original marble that Jesus was laid on, the limestone slab. And some lucky Franciscans were able to touch it. And what I want to say, there was no body found. There were no secret bones stashed away. There is no image in the Holy Sepulchre because he's risen. There is no image in the Ark of the Covenant because it's just two angels and a void, because God is beyond all images, which is why we need to tear some down. That news will fortify us, that good news, with what we need to get through the challenges that your generation in particular is facing. With the time we have left, I look forward to some pushback, some questions, feedback. Thank you very much.